Why is it that over 1,200 athletes have been popped for the oral steroid stanozolol, also called winstrol? What makes this compound worth the risk of deleterious side effects for your health, multi-year sports bans, and exposing yourself to public scrutiny and shame? This question drove me crazy for years because the only information I could find was bodybuilders talking about how it gave them a dry, chiseled look on stage, but made their joints a little bit sore. I don't care about all that. What I wanted to know is why athletes across multiple sports, Ben Johnson, the 100-meter sprinter, Ilya Ilin, one of the best weightlifters ever, swimmers, baseball players, rugby players, etc., were all getting caught using this drug. Well, today I'm going to answer that question, looking at why I even cared in the first place, why what bodybuilders think just doesn't matter for real sports, and what it's actually doing that makes it so valuable for sports performance. Let's start with the background. So let's turn the clocks back about 5 years. I've been into strength training for a while now, and I've got very into Olympic weightlifting, which also happens to be going through a very public scandal at the moment regarding doping. Now, weightlifting is not alone in having dirty secrets. In fact, even just a few weeks ago, James Magnuson, the poster boy for the Enhanced Games, highlighted the fact that in the lead up to the Tokyo Olympics, many swimmers were caught doping, but they were not exposed until after they'd raced at the Olympic Games. But at this time, weightlifting was having their dirty laundry aired very, very publicly. One of the results of this was that I kept noticing that athletes were getting popped for the same compound, stanozolol or winstrol. So naturally, I slapped it into Google and the results were really underwhelming. It's an oral steroid, which I already knew. It was a dihydrotestosterone derivative, which didn't really know what that meant, which increased muscle mass, but reduced estrogenic effects, so could cause joint pain, but reduced water retention. But that doesn't really make sense, so I continued to research. And what I just couldn't find is anyone that wasn't a bodybuilder talking about it. In fact, I remember vividly watching a More Plates, More Dates video on Ben Johnson getting caught, the 100-meter sprinter, for stanozolol, and him talking about how it didn't make sense why they'd be using a synthetic derivative that was easy to test for, which is true, and something that would be drying out your joints. And I thought, there are so many athletes getting caught for this that he's clearly missing something. Now, yes, it is easier to test for, so there is a risk to using it. But that just means that there must be some big benefit if they're choosing to use it despite the risk. And I just couldn't possibly fathom that athletes whose entire livelihood depends on their body working well would be risking sore, achy joints. What was I missing? Okay, so let's talk about why what bodybuilders think just doesn't apply to real sports. All they really care about, right? And this is not really hating on bodybuilding, it's a beauty pageant. All they care about is accruing muscle tissue. So all they really need to do is have hormone, any steroid, bind to an androgen receptor, which then results in gene transcription and upregulates muscle protein synthesis, increasing muscle mass. And for the most part, all steroids do that. All steroid hormones bind and they cause muscle protein synthesis. Now, there are some other downstream effects. So estrogen, for example, some of them will have more or less estrogenic effects and therefore affect water retention, joint pain, libido, brain health. If it's very low, your brain health will be rubbish, etc. And some of them have minor neurological effects that could bring a specific look. But in sports, extra muscle mass kind of doesn't matter. A, because there are weight categories. B, because most of them are skill sports. And C, because conditioning is really valuable to many things. More muscle mass means more tissue to oxygenate, and in endurance sports, that doesn't matter. So let's talk about what stanozolol actually does. Okay, so all we really need to understand in order to understand stanozolol at this base level is just DHT, dihydrotestosterone. So in both males and females, we produce testosterone. It's got a variety of functions in the body. In males, generally, there's 5-alpha reductase reduces testosterone, adding a hydrogen group, forming DHT. Adding this single hydrogen here drastically and completely changes the effects that this has on the body. Okay, so dihydrotestosterone has a variety of functions, some good, some bad. Male pattern baldness caused by dihydrotestosterone. Penis enlargement during puberty caused by dihydrotestosterone. Coordination and force production, which you see a massive increase of during puberty, is due to dihydrotestosterone, and that's why athletes want it. So this increase in DHT-like effects ultimately drives skill acquisition, which is why it improves so many sports. If you can acquire the skill of weightlifting, sprinting, swimming, etc. better, you can compete better, whatever the skill is. Even the simplest things that people might consider simple, they are all a skill. A bench press is a skill. A snatch is a skill. A clean and jerk is a skill. Sprinting is a skill. All of these are a skill. So using a DHT-based drug like stanozolol improves skill acquisition, which makes you better at your job as an athlete. Now, on top of this, the second thing that stanozolol is going to drive is the ability to produce force. Now, it improves this neurological connection between your brain and your muscles, allowing you to contract harder. And ultimately, this is driving what is seen when you have people with, they are muscular, but not much muscle mass, squatting insane weights or whatever it may be. The ability to increase contractility and force output with relatively minimal increases in muscle mass and body weight is so valuable to athletes. It is unbelievable. So those are the primary two things. The second thing I want to hark on at again is just like bodybuilding being stupid. The amount of times that I came across, it makes your joints achy because it's anti-estrogenic. From everything I've seen, it is not anti-estrogenic. Dihydrotestosterone cannot become estrogen, but all of these athletes, if they're using dihydrotestosterone, will be supplementing with testosterone. Therefore, you end up with estrogen and their joints are fine. Are there still some mild effects? Maybe, but I think ultimately this was just silly bro science. The final reason that athletes use stanozolol is it's oral. There are other DHT derivatives that have similar effects on your ability to acquire skills and produce force, but they're not orally bioavailable. The advantage of this generally is clearance time. You can find on the WADA website that a lot of the injectable compounds, due to the esters they're bound to that limits and slows down absorption time, means that detection time for some injectable steroids can be months, sometimes years, whereas historically, stanozolol's detection time used to be weeks, meaning that they could use it in intense training blocks and go and hide up in the mountains somewhere and then be clean come the competition. So the final thing is, why is it not used now? And I kind of alluded to it right then, is testing's got better. When stanozolol is broken down in the liver, first or second pass, there are metabolites, meaning when it is broken down, there are certain things that are kind of not as useful to the process of, the contraction and the skill acquisition that sit in the body and take time to be cleared. If WADA takes a urine or a blood test, they can detect these metabolites and they are not natural. You do not produce stanozolol, therefore they know you use the drug. So that's pretty much the summary. Hopefully that scratched someone else's itch. It took me way too long to find the answer to this. And basically it was just curiosity. It just really annoyed me that all these athletes were getting caught for using it. And all I could see is about how it was making achy joints. And that's just how I am. If you found this interesting, consider dropping a like. If there's anything you'd like me to discuss, please let me know. And otherwise, have a fantastic day.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.